All right, so I'm seeing a ton of people trickling in, so I'll get us started real quickly with a little intro. My name is Alexi. I'm the Associate Director of Marketing here at Med School Coach. We have a great panel for you today. We're going to talk about the journey to becoming a doctor. The session is going to be exclusively Q&A. We have a couple of questions that were pre-submitted that we're going to address first. Throughout the entire session, if you have any questions for our physicians, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. Feel free to start putting them into that Q&A box as soon as you think of it. You don't have to wait till the end or wait for a prompt. Once you think of the question, just put it right in there. Looks like we already have one, which is excellent. So I'm going to let our physicians give a little intro. So we'll start with Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Alexi. So my name is Dr. Lee, and I am a practicing dermatologist in the suburbs of Philadelphia. My specialty is really working with high school students like yourself to try to get into BSMD programs, and we can talk about what that is later on in the webinar. I am originally from Illinois, and I graduated from Northwestern's 7-year BSMD program. During my time there, I was on the admissions committee for their BSMD program. After that, I did my dermatology residency at Brown University in Rhode Island. I did my fellowship at Harvard, and then I went back to Brown and was an assistant professor at the School of Medicine there for several years before moving to Philadelphia. And I'm really excited to be here today and to answer all of your questions.
And Dr. Marinelli.
Thank you. So I'm the Director of Advising at Med School Coach, and I work primarily with pre-med students that are in college already. And so I do a lot of advising there, but we also work with a lot of high school students that are thinking about applying to medical school when they're in college, and a lot of non-traditional students too, who maybe have already finished college or doing other things. I am a primary care physician. I went to medical school at UC Irvine and then residency at Tripler Army Medical Center in Hawaii. Excited to join you guys tonight, and please feel free to ask tons of questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Excellent. So let's get started. Dr. Lee, you already mentioned BSMD programs, but can you give an overview on what is a BSMD or a BSDO program?
So that's a great question. So a BSMD program is a program in which you're applying to both the undergrad school and the medical school at the same time. And so basically you're applying as a high school student and trying to get admissions to medical school. With BSMD programs, they're super competitive because, as you can imagine, you're not only applying to college, but you're also applying to medical school. And so the benefits of a BSMD program is that typically the programs give you a guaranteed seat in medical school as long as you fulfill certain requirements like a GPA requirement or things like that.
Excellent. And Dr. Marinelli, could you go over the traditional route?
Yeah, so the traditional route is somebody that is applying in college. And so usually if you want to matriculate straight from college into medical school, you apply your junior year of college. So that's kind of like the most traditional, very common route. Alternatively, people also, and this is becoming a little bit more popular now, apply their senior year of college, and then they have a gap year in between college and medical school. So they have a year off before they start medical school. So those are kind of the more traditional routes of people that are applying to medical school.
So for students who are currently in high school, you know, whether they're going the direct med route or the traditional route, what kind of extracurricular activities should they be looking at both in high school and when they start undergrad?
I think the most important extracurricular activity that you can do if you're interested in becoming a physician, whether you're a high school student or a undergraduate college student, is to really gain clinical experience. So it's really hard to say that you want to be a doctor or to even understand what medicine is if you haven't actually been in a clinical setting. And what I mean by a clinical setting is either volunteering at a hospital volunteering at a nursing home, working with hospice, or anything where you're actually working with patients. A lot of local hospitals have specific teen volunteer programs for high school students. And so those are great ways to start to get some clinical exposure so that you can actually see what medicine is. In addition to getting clinical programs, physicians are leaders of a healthcare team. And so it's important to demonstrate that you have leadership experience. And with that, we don't expect you to be, leading a healthcare team or anything like that, but we do expect you to be a leader in your student clubs or your extracurriculars, whether that means, being president of your school's HOSA chapter or being treasurer of FMLA, Future Medical Leaders Association. Being a leader of some type of extracurricular is important to demonstrate that you have those skills to work with a team and to also uh, accomplish an objective. And then the cherry on top is doing some research. So it's harder to find research opportunities as a high school student. There are definitely several very established research programs specifically for high school students that you could apply to and do research with over the summer. But obviously, we know that it's difficult to find research positions. So that's why I said that it's kind of like the cherry on the top if you're able to gain any research experience.
And with all those extracurriculars in mind, does that influence who can ultimately apply to direct med programs? Can anyone, kind of throw a net in the water, or do they need to meet certain qualifications?
So really the minimum qualifications are just to make sure you at least have a certain GPA or SAT score. It's very, very rare to get into a BSMD program without any clinical experience. I've seen it happen though because of COVID. So last year during last application cycle, there just really were no clinical opportunities available. And so I have seen students get in without any clinical experience working with patients. But again, it's hard to convince an admissions committee that you want to become a doctor or you want to work in healthcare when you've never actually seen what a healthcare setting is like.
Excellent. So we're already seeing a lot of questions here about university rankings. So are university rankings important? Should they influence a decision? When it goes to BSMD versus a traditional route, would it be better to go to a direct med program from a lower ranking college versus the traditional route with a higher ranking college? Should it have much weight when making a decision?
So I'll start with this question and then I'll also bounce it over to Dr. Marinelli. So what's really surprising about BSMD programs is that sometimes the college is lower ranking, but the medical school is a rock star awesome medical school. And so if you get into a direct program and a direct BSMD or a BSDO program and the medical school affiliated is a rock star awesome medical school, take that spot, because ultimately when you're looking for residency placements, it's really about the opportunities that your medical school has offered you that will determine your residency placement, not so much the quality of the freshman lab that you did when you were 18 as a college student. It's really your medical school and your medical school academic record and opportunities that make a difference. I'll also bounce this over to Dr. Marinelli for her comments on rankings of undergrad schools.
Yeah, so this is a really common question, and there's probably different answers depending on who you ask. But overall, the ranking of your undergraduate school is not terribly important when you're applying to medical school. And I always like to give a couple examples. And so one example, let's say we have two students, all things being equal, and let's say one goes to Harvard. Not to pick on you, Dr. Lee, I just came up, Harvard's what I always go to for high ranking school. But let's say one goes to Harvard and one goes to a state school, and all things being equal, the Harvard student gets a 3.5 and the state school student gets a 4.0. Probably more preference is going to be placed on that 4.0 because the performance in undergrad is really, really where it comes down to who is most competitive. And that's going to really draw the attention of admissions committees. Now let's take the same two students, and let's say the Harvard student gets a 4.0 and the state school student gets a 4.0. Well, in that case, then Harvard probably gives that student a little bit of edge because everything else is equal, but since that's a higher ranking school, maybe known a little bit more for its rigor, that can give that student a little bit of a leg up when it comes to admissions. So overall, I think university rankings are important, but it should be something that's really considered in the context of everything. I really encourage students to figure out where they're going to be the most comfortable and where they're going to succeed the most, because ultimately they need to do very, very, very well academically to get into medical school. And if you go to some place just because it has a great name and ranking and you don't do well there, then that's not going to help you at all get into medical school. So prioritize where you're going to do your best. And then at the same time, think about what school it is, where do they rank? And if that is a factor that you can play into the overall environment of the school and how you feel about the school, then you certainly can. But I don't think that's the be all end all of getting into medical school at the end of the day.
Excellent. So one thing that's always going to be on a student's mind as they start this journey is the cost. So can you both discuss a little bit of the cost of a direct med program versus a traditional route, and if there's that much of a discrepancy?
So really, a direct med program versus a traditional route is pretty similar. You're still paying for the cost of undergraduate as well as the cost of whatever the medical school is. The only difference I can foresee is if instead of doing a direct route, you went to like a local state school for your undergraduate education, and that is a little cheaper than going to an out-of-state private school that some of these BSMD programs are affiliated with.
Yeah, so just to echo that, exactly, the costs are pretty much the same. But medical school, in addition to the undergraduate costs, when you apply to medical school, it does cost several $1,000s to actually just apply to medical school. That includes like the application that gets sent to all of the medical schools that you're applying to, similar to the common application in high school. You also have to do secondary applications, which are additional applications that have a cost to each of them. And then there's interview costs. With COVID, there's been more virtual interviews, but in the past, students used to have to go and fly across the country to several different interviews to medical schools. And so you can imagine arranging that travel and the hotel and the flight and the car and everything that can be quite costly. So to apply is a few $1,000s. And then of course, attending medical school is quite expensive, as you all know. Attending medical school in your state usually tends to save you money if you're an in-state student. And then there's also private versus public institutions, where private institutions tend to be more costly.
Excellent. So one question that I think could apply differently to both routes. How important are internships as far as gaining experience? For Dr. Lee on the direct route?
Mm-hmm. So internships are a little bit rare on the high school side. It really depends on the quality of the experience you are getting with that internship. So are you doing research with that internship? Are you actually interning with a pharmaceutical company and working on clinical things? It really depends on the nature of the internship. Because they're very rare on the high school side, and the reason that they're rare is that a lot of internships do require you to be 18 or over, so a lot of our high school students just don't have that opportunity to do internships. If you get one, it's great, but if you don't do an internship, then it's not looked upon negatively at all, because we understand that the age restrictions of these opportunities can be a huge barrier for high school students.
Dr. Marinelli on the traditional side?
Yeah, I mean, internships aren't I guess, as common for traditional students either, just because lots of students will just pursue other opportunities within their university. So lots of times students can find university opportunities without necessarily an internship or something external. So that's not necessarily something that is really crucial for applying to medical school in the traditional route, or really something that's needed. But totally agree with Dr. Lee. Like, if you are looking for an internship opportunity, it's really about the quality of the experience. If it's an internship in research, if it's an internship in some type of clinical setting or clinical research, you really want to look to make sure that you're getting patient interaction, that you're working with healthcare professionals and things like that. Otherwise, you're just putting something down on paper. You really need to be able to talk about the quality of your experience, why it was important, what strength did you gain from it, what did you learn from it, etc.
Excellent. So going back to you, Dr. Marinelli, what are some important factors to determine how good a pre-med program is at a particular school?
Sorry, that's a great question. And interestingly enough, when I went to medical school, or when I went to undergrad rather, there was no pre-med program in my school, and not every school has a pre-med program at all. And I just majored in general biology and, kind of fulfilled the prerequisites.
Oh, maybe Alexi, we can bounce to the next question until Dr. Marinelli is back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry about that. As you can see, I'm home with my son who is with his dad, and somehow he snuck into the office, but I apologize about that. So as I was saying, you don't necessarily have to have a designated pre-medical program. You can major in whatever you want, but more importantly, you need to see that the school has the particular experiences and the particular coursework that you're looking for. So I think it's important for people that are in high school and that are getting ready to go to college is think about, what is it that you're really trying to learn? And what is it that you want to major in, and make sure that that college has your major. And of course you could change, and that's totally fine, but at least have some principles down that that college is going to offer, and that they have a strong program in that major. In addition, like as I was mentioning, making sure that they have very good experiences. Do they have plenty of research opportunities? Are they maybe affiliated with hospitals? Are they in a big enough city that you could actually find experiences outside of the university? I mean, these are all kind of crucial things to look for in your program, so that when you're starting, you're of course comfortable, you're happy, you're in a good environment, someplace you're really looking forward to learning, but then you also are not stretched to find opportunities later on, which could really hamper your application.
Wonderful. So Dr. Lee, we have an attendee asking, for some BSMD programs, it looks like students don't necessarily need a 4-year undergrad. Is it beneficial to spend less time in undergrad? Do other med schools or residencies look down upon less years of studies? And what are some positives that students can see?
So there's several BSMD programs where you do either 3 years of undergrad, or more rarely where you do 2 years of undergrad. And so the curriculum is designed so that you will be able to get in all the courses you need during that shortened time frame. And the way that they do that is that you're basically required to take courses over the summer. So it's not that you're getting less academic time, it's just that you're spending every summer doing orgo or organic chemistry or physics or other coursework over the summer. That you are still well prepared for the medical school if you're planning on going to the affiliated guaranteed medical school spot. Where you are at a disadvantage is if you are planning to apply out of your program. So if you're applying to different medical schools not part of the guaranteed. And the reason is because with only 2 years of undergrad or 3 years of undergrad and taking courses every summer, you just don't have enough time to gain the extracurricular experiences or even the life experiences to be a strong applicant for other medical schools. But if you're only planning to stay within the medical school that is affiliated with a guaranteed program, it's totally sufficient.
So this is a great question that just came in, and it's more focused on the traditional route. So is it important for students to look at the percentage of medical school matriculants when they're trying to pick out which college they pursue in pre-med?
I think that's a great number to look at, but I wouldn't necessarily base your decision on that alone. Again, similar to the rankings, this is a factor of which undergrad or an aspect of which undergrad to choose that you should take into consideration among many different factors, many different aspects, but certainly you can look at it. There's kind of two ways to look at it though. You can look at it one way where if there's a high percentage of medical school matriculants, then you're probably pretty confident that that school has experience advising students and providing opportunities for students to get ready for medical school. However, the contrary is that you are also, if they have a high number of matriculants, that means that more than likely there is a high number of applicants every single year that are vying for opportunities within that college. So for example, one of like the notorious pre-med programs in the country is UCLA. A lot of applicants come from UCLA, and you'll hear from some students that they struggle to find certain opportunities because there are so many other people that are looking to go to medical school. So they're all looking for research. They're all looking for clinical experiences and shadowing and things like that. And it can also be hard sometimes to distinguish yourself among other candidates for letters of recommendation or relationships with advisors or professors. So I think it's something to look at and consider, but really, really should be considered in conjunction with all of the other aspects of applying to undergrad and which undergrad is really best for you.
So circling back to the direct med route, if high school students get accepted into a BSMD program, does that mean they're guaranteed admission into medical school and it's clear sailing, or are there certain benchmarks that they have to hit and maintain?
So you are guaranteed if a high school student gets into a BSMD program, you are guaranteed a spot in the medical school, assuming that you meet certain criteria. And often the criteria are certain GPA requirements in your pre-med classes. Some programs have certain community service hours, and a lot of programs also require you to score a certain minimum on the MCAT. So it's not like once you get in, you can just, skip all your classes and have smooth sailing. You really still do need to be an exceptional college student, do well on your MCATs, as well as fulfill the GPA requirements to make sure that you maintain that spot in the medical school.
Excellent. So we have one student asking, they wanted to go into local hospitals and shadow, but they haven't really been able to shadow or volunteer during the pandemic. Are schools going to take that into account for direct medical programs and consequently pre-med and medical school programs?
So definitely. So we're definitely seeing a lot less shadowing opportunities as well as a lot less clinical opportunities because of COVID. This is something that's affecting all of our students nationwide. So that's good because it means that everyone's going to have fewer opportunities, so you're not going to be at a disadvantage. What I really want to caution you, though, is that you're not using this COVID pandemic as an excuse for why you haven't been able to find opportunities. So in these situations, this is when you need to create your own opportunities, whether that is volunteering at food banks, because food banks need volunteers, and you can even be, packaging food or helping to create the distribution lines without having contact with people. or whether that is creating some type of neighborhood food drive or neighborhood, blanket and scarf drive for the homeless or for these vulnerable populations. This is a great time if you aren't able to find established programs for you to create your own opportunities. And it's really the student who is saying, I couldn't find these opportunities because of COVID. So instead, I did this instead. That was even bigger and better. And look how great that turned out. That's how you're going to stand out. If you're just the student that says, well, because of COVID, I had no shadowing and I had no hospital volunteering, and that's why I have nothing, that student is not really going to stand out.
Excellent. So we have a student who is interested in going into the medical field, but they're not quite sure they want to become a physician. So could you each share a couple of reasons why someone should go into medicine, and what are things that should be considered if maybe it's not going to be the right fit for them?
Yeah, so I mean, I think first off, as Dr. Lee had mentioned earlier, get experience in the healthcare field. It's really hard to know as a high school student if this is for sure what you want to do. I mean, it's a big old world out there and there's lots of opportunities, and certainly healthcare is a great job. I mean, and so many different opportunities within healthcare, but you really have a sense of purpose with getting to help people and work with so many different diverse individuals and so many different professionals. And there's all kinds of areas for you to work inside of healthcare. So I do think that there are wonderful opportunities. And if it's something you're really interested in, then get some time shadowing. But I think the other thing too is it is important to remember that becoming a physician is not the only way to get into healthcare and to be really involved. I mean, there's so many alternative routes. And so what I would do is encourage people to try to get experience with each one of those. I mean, if you are really interested in a physician, start there, but try to work with some nurses, try to work with maybe some nurse practitioners or physician's assistants or therapists. I mean, there's just so many avenues. And if you really feel that medicine is what you want to do, then you can explore those different options a little bit more thoroughly in undergrad or throughout your high school career.
And I really echo what Dr. Marinelli said. It's hard to really decide if medicine is for you when you haven't had the experience yet. For the student that's not sure, I think that's what your undergraduate education is for. You have a lot more opportunities in your undergraduate education to explore different healthcare careers, and maybe to not do healthcare. Maybe you want to be in biotech engineering and create the next COVID vaccine, right? So there are things that you may not have thought of as a high school student, that as career paths that you can possibly explore when you're actually in college, and can do research with professors or have a lot more opportunities to shadow with different types of healthcare and healthcare related professionals.
So piggybacking on that question, why did each of you choose to become a physician? And when did that come to you?
So I didn't really have any medical background, and my family, nobody's a physician, nobody's actually finished college in my family. But when I was in high school, I kind of started thinking about careers that I thought would be really interesting. And I really wanted to be an archaeologist, just like Indiana Jones. And hopefully some of those young kids out there know who I'm referencing. If not, these are movies that you absolutely must see. So go and, go on whatever TV thing you have and watch Indiana Jones, hopefully tonight after this webinar. But I really thought that was, that was going to be it. I was going to be some archaeologist. But then once I got into college, I realized oh, it's probably not going to be a career that can sustain me financially at all. So I started thinking about other careers, and I was like, yeah, I was interested in medicine. And so I did just what I had said before. I just kind of started getting experience shadowing and being involved with some healthcare centers. And it turns out that I really, really liked it. And then, that's the end of the story. And I just changed my major from history to biology, and just one step after another towards becoming a physician.
And so I echo Renee in very similar ways. I do not come from a family of physicians or any healthcare personnel. I'm also the first, well, other than my sisters, to even go to college and graduate college. I chose medicine because I am the youngest of three children, and for all the parents out there that are listening, you know that when you have three children, your youngest child literally just gets dragged around to all of your older children's activities. And that was me. And so when your oldest sister, who my oldest sister is 7 years older, so when your oldest sister has acne that is like so bad that she won't come out of her room and all she does is scream at your family, you notice the difference it makes when she goes to her dermatologist every week and her acne gets better. And as you know, a 7 year old or an 8 year old, to see my sister, like to actually see my sister again and have a sister instead of a screaming teenager behind closed doors, and to see her have friends and to see her really, be a person again, that really makes an impact on you. And so I was dragged to every doctor's appointment that she had. And really, as a 7 year old or an 8 year old, I really remember the impact that it had on our family from a psychosocial perspective, where, our family relationships, our family dynamics were better just because my sister, her acne was better and she was actually comfortable coming out of her room. So I think, those are influences where, as a 7 year old, I didn't know that it would have such a major impact on my career. But definitely, by the time I was in high school, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, what I thought of was like, wow, I really can see what medicine can do for something as simple as acne for a teenage girl. I experienced it because I sat in those doctor's offices many, many times before the age of iPads, when you could give an iPad to your kid in the waiting room. So I was just sitting there looking at everything going on. Okay. And that's when my career path became a lot clearer for me. So for me, my clinical experience wasn't from shadowing, it was actually from personal experience.
Excellent. So we've talked a little bit about BSMD programs. Can you give an overview of BSDO programs and how they differ? Are they more or less competitive?
Yeah, so BSDO programs are a little bit less competitive, and I will actually defer to Dr. Marinelli in a little bit to talk about the difference between MD schools and DO schools. But in general, BSDO programs pretty much follow the same pathway in which you're applying to both the undergrad school and the medical school at the same time. The difference is just whether you want to go to osteopathic medical school, which is DO, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine, or whether you want to go to a allopathic medical school where you become an MD. And the difference is minute, but I'll have Dr. Marinelli explain the benefits of DO versus an MD school.
Yeah, so when people think about becoming a doctor, or if you see a physician, most people are thinking of MDs or allopathic physicians, which Dr. Lee and myself both are. However, there is another pathway, which is the Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine, or DO physician, which is becoming quite more common. It was, oh gosh, I want to say DO schools were developed, mid-century, 1950s or so. I could be totally wrong, but they've been around for quite a while, and it's just becoming more and more common of a route to become a physician. And Dr. Lee can attest to this, that once you're a practicing physician, you work alongside osteopathic, allopathic physicians, just kind of like anybody else. There's really not a huge practice difference once you've graduated medical school and you've finished your residency. The large difference is the education. So they are separate schools, and you still learn anatomy, physiology, all of the same things, but doctors of osteopathic medicine tend to focus more on holistic kind of treatment options, and they also do learn something called osteopathic manipulative medicine, where it's kind of similar to chiropractic medicine. And I'm sorry for DOs out there that if I'm butchering this at all, but it's similar to chiropractic medicine in some aspects, where you actually manipulate the body for some pain relief and symptom relief, which is really interesting and very cool tool for those physicians to have on hand when they're treating patients. But the medical school education really mirrors each other, very, very similar. And then after medical school, the residencies used to be different, but now the residencies are combined. So you can go to residency with a DO or an MD, it doesn't really matter. And then, as I said, once you're done and you're practicing, there's really not a huge difference, except that DOs have some extra manipulative techniques to use on patients for treatment as well.
Excellent. So if a student was to get accepted into a direct med program, once they finish with their undergraduate training, would they have the option to apply to other medical schools, or are they committed to their singular program?
So it depends on the school. So you're never committed to your medical school. It's never binding. The caveat where they get you is that if you do apply out to other medical schools, you lose your guaranteed spot at the medical school you're originally affiliated with. Some schools don't have that caveat. They let you apply out without losing your guaranteed spot. So it really just depends on the nuances of the programs.
Excellent. So I'm also seeing a lot of questions about the MCAT. So can you talk a little bit about what the MCAT is, what students can do to prepare, and just how it differs preparation-wise from a direct medical student to a traditional route student?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And I just looked it up to be trying to be as accurate as possible. So it looks like the first osteopathic school was actually in 1892, but definitely it took a little while for it to kind of pick up. And I believe it was the 1950s where I had that number in my head that kind of it really started picking up. And now there's just so many applicants and so many matriculants from DO schools as well, because so many people want to become physicians. So sorry about that. But to talk about the MCAT is kind of one of those first, I think, really difficult standardized tests that people are taking. I know a lot of people, place the SAT as this is really tough and it's going to determine so much about where you go. And so maybe that's your kind of really first hard standardized test. And then the MCAT's like this step up in another beast that you have to take in order to apply to medical school. So if you're going the traditional route, and I'll let Dr. Lee talk about the BSMD route, if you're going the traditional route, you usually take this somewhere around that junior year of college when you're going to be applying to medical school. And essentially every medical school requires you to take the MCAT, and the score is very, very, very important on your acceptance chances into medical school. Medical schools place a lot of weight on your GPA and your MCAT. They have thousands upon thousands of applicants to review. And one of the ways that they kind of stratify and go through some of those applicants is screen people with their GPA and their MCAT. So if you don't have a high enough GPA or a high enough MCAT, then it's going to be difficult for you to get into medical school. So the MCAT is an online test now. It used to be paper, and then it was on a computer. And so now it is. Dr. Lee, did you take it on paper? You did.
Yes. Yes.
I think I was the first year that they had put it on computer, and I just thought that was great. I was like, I'm so glad I don't have to take it on paper, because it got shorter, actually. I think it was like an hour less now that it was on computer. And now I think it's even, I don't even know. I'm not an expert on the MCAT at all and how to prepare for that. I think I blocked all of that out of my brain a long time ago. But the bottom line, it's an admissions test. It's really to see your knowledge and your skill set as far as, as an adjunct to your academic history and your GPA on how capable you're going to be to perform in medical school and how well you're going to be able to perform in medical school on other standardized tests. And for those of you who don't know, and if you don't want to think this far ahead, you can just tune me out for a second, but medical school and becoming a physician is full of tests. And so in medical school, you have a couple licensing exams, which are called the USMLE. And so the MCAT is a good predictor actually on how a student will perform. Maybe not the best predictor, but it is a predictor of how that student's going to perform on those subsequent licensing exams. So it is one of the reasons that medical schools use it and place just so much value on that exam.
And then I echo what Dr. Marinelli said about what the MCAT is overall. In general, with the BSMD route, the MCAT minimum that you have to get is significantly lower than what you might have to get to actually be a super competitive candidate for medical school. So that is starting to change a little bit where some programs, instead of giving a set score or set percentile, so in the past, some schools would say you have to get in the 80th percentile of the MCAT, which is not hard at all. If you think about the 80th percentile of the SAT, that's equivalent to like a 1250 or a 1300, right? The difference is that everyone is super smart, but at the same time, if you got into a BSMD program, an 80th percentile in the MCAT is not hard. What some medical BSMD programs are starting to do is they're starting to say you need to get an MCAT score that is at least equivalent to the average of last year's matriculating class to make sure that you really aren't just, coasting through college and ignoring all of or skipping all of your classes. That being said, I don't know if that change is going to happen by the time you guys apply, because usually for schools that are making that change where they're increasing the MCAT requirement, for students who are already in the program, they're kind of grandfathered into the old requirements of typically around an 80th percentile on the MCAT.
Excellent. So I saw a couple of students asking about getting started on preparing. I know that there's a lot of classes you might want to take in college before you start studying. But if you do want a sneak peek at the material, we do have a free MCAT prep app. You can do it on your computer or on your phone. Just go to medschoolcoach.com/MCAT. We have an amazing team that put it together. It covers a lot of content and you can build a study schedule, watch videos. It's really a tremendous resource, totally free and ad-free. So you won't get a pop-up every 15 seconds when you're trying to learn, which is always very frustrating. So moving on, do you recommend students work part-time, maybe in a local hospital while they're studying during undergrad, just to prevent accumulating too much debt, or do you recommend just focusing solely on your studies?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the student and their opportunities. I myself worked throughout undergrad and kind of put myself through college. And it's quite difficult, right? Because you're trying to balance your time between studying and extracurricular activities and doing well. But what I'd really try to do was make my extracurricular activities also the extracurricular activities that medical schools want to see, also my work activities. So I got a job working at a doctor's office. I was like a student tutor. So things like that are also extracurricular activities that are going to look good on my application and actually really help me stand out on my application. So if you absolutely have to work, then I think that that's probably something to look into. Could you, as Alexi mentioned, could you get a job at a hospital or a physician's office or a clinical research coordinator? There's lots of positions out there that you could potentially do for paid employment. And then also it's going to look great on your application. And that's totally acceptable to have paid employment. I also recommend that if those are your extracurricular activities, though, you do also have some volunteer work too, where you're just solely giving your time in the purpose of helping somebody else out. Because, work has your kind of a benefit for yourself, but volunteer work is really trying to be as altruistic as you possibly can by giving your time to somebody else or another organization. So I recommend having both. But I think it really depends on the student. If they have to work, if they want to work, if they have those opportunities, it's certainly acceptable to do so.
Excellent. So we have a student here who is just learning about direct medical programs tonight and is currently a junior in high school. Dr. Lee, what are some things they can do to apply and stand out on these programs? And if it ultimately doesn't work out, Dr. Marinelli, for the traditional route, what can they do to help college admissions and get into a higher ranking program?
Mhm. So definitely, first of all, focus on your SATs and your GPA. You really do have to show that you're a top tier academic student to get into these programs. And then after that, doing some of the things we discussed earlier on this call, which include getting clinical experience, understanding what medicine is, shadowing a doctor, doing research if you have that opportunity. Engaging in community service is really important, as well as getting leadership positions within whatever community service activity you're doing or within whatever extracurricular activity you're doing is important. BSMD admissions committees consider students holistically, and so they're not going, you don't need to check off a box in all of those categories for sure, but you certainly do need to show that you have a demonstrated interest and that you're a motivated student. When I look at activities that students do, whether it's community service or shadowing, I really look for quality instead of quantity. Okay. And so, as a junior, you might think like, oh, well, I'm going to smash in all of my clinical hours by doing a service trip to Guatemala, on a medical missions trip type of doing at a village somewhere where I'm going to do 200 hours over 2 weeks or something. That is okay, but it really would look much better if you did 200 hours, for 4 hours every Saturday over 4 years. And so you don't want to think of this as a checklist. You want to think of this more as quality over quantity.
Dr. Marinelli, anything to add for trying to get into a higher ranking pre-med program?
No, I agree with all of these points. I mean, this is kind of the same thing that you want to look for if you're trying to get into an undergraduate program without the combination of the undergrad education and the medical education. So yes, these were all great points by Dr. Lee.
Wonderful. So on more of a personal note, what are some hardships that you both faced during your school career? Obviously, it's a very long journey, so there might be more than one. And is there any advice you would give to aspiring physicians as they work towards getting through medical school?
Yeah, I'll just say I faced a ton of hardships, which, compared to other people, I think probably aren't that hard because I've seen so many different stories of people going through different things. And I think this ultimately applying to medical school, either if you're in high school or if you're in college or you're thinking about it and becoming a full-fledged practicing physician, it's a huge long road, and inevitably things are going to happen. You can have health problems, your family could have health problems. My mother actually passed away from colon cancer when I was applying to medical school, and that was extremely difficult. It was devastating for my family and I, but life kind of happens. But you're applying for so long, there's just inevitable events and things that are going to come up. And so I think if this is truly what you want to do, then you just keep focused, keep your head down and keep pushing through, and keep living your life too. You can't just ignore everything happening around you because you're pre-med or you're in medical school. You kind of have to still maintain all of those relationships and have the support and the things that really sustain you in addition to what you're doing academically. And one thing that really got me through, and again, my dad, as I said, I didn't have anybody who'd been through the process before. My dad was a firefighter, but one thing he told me that really helped me with undergrad and medical school was like, he told me, Renee, thinking of this as this, ultimate goal, it's too big. It's too overwhelming to try to be like, hey, I'm a freshman in college and I want to become an attending physician, 13 years later or whatever it is. Like, that's just too much to swallow. Just take it one step at a time. And one step could be, you know what, I just need to get through this organic chemistry test. That's the only step I need to focus on right now. I just need to get through this semester and, do well on my final exams. And so I kind of, as hard as it can be sometimes, just keeping that mentality of focusing on one step at a time, whatever that step is and wherever you're at, focus on that, because you're just looking at that end goal. It can be very overwhelming. It can be discouraging, but if you focus on where you're at, the path that you need to be on. I think that's where a lot of people achieve success.
So I am so ancient. My first hardship is that I had to apply to college on paper and request applications because we didn't have a common app. But all joking aside, I think that this process is really, really confusing. And it's really difficult to understand what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it when you don't have mentorship or when you don't have guidance. Dr. Marinelli said, she and I are both first generation college students. So to not have a parent who went to college who can be like, this is the SAT that you need to take, or this is the MCAT you need to take. I relied a lot on my friends for that, who had parents who were doctors or who had at least, siblings or other families that were professionals to even know what to do in college. It's not just about getting good grades. It's not about academics. Just even knowing what steps to take when you don't have someone to help you or to give you simple guidance on basic steps was really difficult because we just kind of had to figure it out on your own. And when you're trying to piece things together on your own, you often miss a lot of steps because you don't realize it until it's too late that you needed to do this back in your sophomore year or do this back in your freshman year or be doing this now, and so you missed a deadline.
Excellent. So we have one kind of MCAT focused question again, but where a lot of these students are in high school and you can take the SAT more than once. Can you do the same for the MCAT? And if so, is there a limit or anything you recommend?
Yes, you can absolutely take it more than once. Gosh, I don't want to tell, and Alexi, maybe you can drop a link in the chat function here, but I want to say you can't take it more than 7 times and you can't take it more than 3 times in 1 year. I want to say it's somewhere around there, but I know we have an article on this from our MCAT team, but it is certainly something you can take more than once. A lot of students do take it more than once. I always like to tell students, though, that when they're preparing for the MCAT, it is a tough exam, and really, if at all possible, you really want to prepare for it one time and take it one time and get an excellent score, because it takes a lot out of you to study for it, to take the exam. And it's a grueling process. So ideally, study as much as you possibly can for it and then just take it one time. But if you don't get the score that you want, or you're just, you could have done better, then you certainly can take it again.
So when it comes to applying to medical school, is there a requirement for volunteer hours? Or I'll add on to this, any sort of extracurricular work activity section that you have to hit? Is there a benchmark, or is it, this is what I got done, and hope you stand out?
So I can answer that from the BSMD side, and then Dr. Marinelli can talk to you about the undergrad side. So there's no benchmark, and I get asked this by parents a lot because they think like, ooh, if I hit 400 hours, I'm going to check off that box. But if you hit 400 hours and all you did was sit at the front desk, directing patients to where they're supposed to go in the hospital, that's not nearly as meaningful as if you hit even just 20 hours or 30 hours actually helping patients post-operatively or pre-operatively. So again, I want to emphasize it's quality over quantity. It's not about how many hours you sat at the front desk or how many hours you spent arranging flowers in the gift shop. It's about what you did during those hours and what you have to show for it. So again, I don't want you to approach an activity thinking of how many hours am I going to get from this. You should approach an activity with what am I going to do during this activity that will help me mature and grow as a person and will help me answer the question of, is medicine the right career for me?
Excellent. So we're closing in on the top of the hour. So I wanted to get one more question in before we have closing remarks. And that one is, what is the interview process like? So Dr. Lee, if you could give it from the direct med perspective, and maybe get the traditional perspective as well.
So on the BSMD side, because of COVID, all the interviews are pretty much on Zoom. On the BSMD side, pretty much the majority of interviews still use a traditional interview method where it's one-on-one, maybe a panel interview where they ask you questions and you respond based on that question. They are starting to move more towards the MMI method, which is more common on the MD side or on the traditional side. I think since we're short on time, I'll just skip to Dr. Marinelli so she can talk a little bit more about the traditional process and the MMI interview process.
Yeah, so with the traditional interviews, as I had mentioned before, you apply with that common application or the primary application. That's usually in early summer. Then in the summer, you will complete your secondary applications. In the end of summer, early fall, all the way until the spring of the following year is really interview season. And that's when medical schools are conducting interviews. And as we had mentioned, a lot of the interviews are online and virtual. The traditional type interview is really the kind of one-on-one interview where you're sitting down with a student or a faculty member at the medical school, and they're asking you questions like, why do you want to become a physician? Tell me why you want to come to this school. What are your strengths, weaknesses? Really those traditional type questions that we think of with interviews. The MMI is also the multiple mini interview. And these are more scenario-based questions where you're given a scenario and it's usually a few lines. You read the scenario, you get a minute or so to think about it, and then you enter a room or you enter a Zoom meeting or what have you with virtual, and then you go and talk and discuss the scenario. And so usually these scenarios are kind of ethical dilemmas, moral dilemmas, patient kind of issues, things like that. And so those take a ton of preparation, and they can be very tricky. And I can't even imagine the level of preparation it must take for some high school students, because I see college students struggle with them. So it is definitely something that if you're given the opportunity to interview at a medical school or a direct medical program, you really want to take the preparation seriously and do a lot of sessions with a trained advisor or physician or somebody who's very familiar with the format of it before your actual interview.
Okay, wonderful. There's a ton of questions that we just couldn't get to. Hopefully some of them were at least touched upon, and all the answers that we did get to. We'll go ahead and send some of these resources over in an email as well. Both Dr. Lee and Dr. Marinelli have done a ton of webinars, and we actually have them on demand. I posted that link, but again, we can send it to you. So if there's a specific thing you want to learn more about, whether it's interviews or the MCAT, we've touched on just about everything you can think of. So you can really get just very specific information completely on demand. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it to Dr. Lee just for some closing remarks.
So I wanted to thank everyone for taking time out on a Tuesday evening to listen to our webinar. And I definitely want to encourage any high school student that is interested potentially in becoming a physician to really take all the opportunities you can to explore that path. Make sure that medicine is for you. And if you're 110% sure that medicine is for you, then the BSMD pathway is an excellent way to go.
Excellent. And anything from Dr. Marinelli?
Yeah, just to echo what Dr. Lee said, I mean, learn about medicine and get the exposure, that you possibly can. I don't know if Alexi had thrown it in the chat function, but another thing that we do offer at Med School Coach is virtual shadowing opportunities, which is free. And I think it's an awesome way just to kind of get your feet wet and to see what some physicians do in different specialties. Even if you're a high school student, if you're a freshman in high school and you're just kind of like toying with the idea of going into the healthcare field, take a look at this virtual shadowing experience. I do think it's very valuable just to kind of see what the life of a physician is like and what are the different types of physicians that are out there and kind of different specialty options. Certainly, between even Dr. Lee and myself, we're vastly different in our practice. And I think that's one of the great things about medicine is you can really curate and find your own interests and make it yours. So definitely start exploring and just learning more about it to kind of get an idea of what the career is like and if this is something that you want to pursue.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank NSHSS for having us and for all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. We know it's a super busy time of year. We really appreciate it. Like I said, we'll send some more resources. But other than that, again, thank you so much for joining us and feel free to go to perspectivedoctor.com and medschoolcoach.com to learn more about how we can help you on your journey.
Yep. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.